Based on the 2023 QLA information that's available for all schools, the most demanding items that were least well performed across the test nationally were in the last 10 questions of the test paper, in paper 1 for the questions. And the makeup of those questions, although they're at the end of the test paper, they are still testing content that comes from previous year groups that's initially taught or introduced in previous year groups. So of the 10 most challenging questions, 5 of them were testing grammatical word classes, and 1 of the questions was testing punctuation, 1 was vocabulary, and 2 were testing verb forms. So when we look at the punctuation question, the reason why pupils found it so difficult is because the pupils were being asked to insert capital letters and full stops in order to make a passage correct in question 43, but it didn't tell the pupils how many capital letters or full stops. Now, for some pupils, that's a license to put in however many you wish. And that automatically makes that a question that's more demanding. So 47.4% of pupils nationally accessed and got that question correct, when actually capital letters and full stops are first introduced in year 1. But it was a very challenging question for capital letters and full stops. If we move on to look at perhaps the word class questions where pupils found it difficult, for example, question 40, the pupils were asked to circle the adverbs in the sentence below, and 42.9% of pupils got that correct, because the correct response is the word quite. So the sentence was, the boy had 7 brothers, each one quite different from the others. And lots of less secure pupils, when they see the word adverb, they automatically think it will be a word that ends in ly, and there isn't a word ending in ly in that sentence. So their comfort blanket or their default setting isn't there, their security net is gone. And the implications of that is a real message to teachers that when we are challenging pupils with the questions towards the end of the paper, the pupils need to be really able to reason with grammar. At the beginning of the paper, it's more of a practicing element, but as we move towards the end of the paper, the QLA is really telling us that less performing items are those where pupils really need secure subject knowledge and they're absolutely capable of reasoning within a terminology of grammar. The main implications for primary schools based on the 2023 tests and QLA are that the Key Stage 2 grammar and punctuation papers 1 and 2 are not Year 6 tests, because they're actually testing the whole of the Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 curriculum. And actually, interestingly, the 2023 paper 1, the grammar questions, there's 36% of the questions are testing Key Stage 1 subject knowledge, in terms of knowledge that is first introduced to our pupils when they're in year 1 and 2. And there's no real surprise there, because the Key Stage 1 grammar appendix is really, really crammed with a lot of content. So we only need to look at the punctuation, for example. We've got capital letters, exclamation mark, question mark, full stops, commas in a list, apostrophe for singular possession, and apostrophe for contraction, all technically belong because they're first introduced in year 1 or 2. When questions are being asked in the Key Stage 2 grammar test, where the content domain is Key Stage 1 subject knowledge, the question type may be more challenging than what perhaps we would give to our pupils in Key Stage 1. So an example of that is question 43, where pupils are asked to insert full stops and capital letters in the passage below so that it's punctuated correctly. Less than 50% of pupils got that question correct, and really that's because it didn't tell them how many capital letters or full stops. So for some pupils, that's a license to just get busy with their pencils and put as many as they wish in. And actually, we would never give pupils in year 1 question 43. What we have to kind of look at in terms of the implications is, what does a capital letter and full stop question look like in year 1, and how do we make that more demanding and challenging in years 3, 5, so that we can prepare our pupils to be able to answer questions that come at the end of the Key Stage 2 paper and have proven to be very challenging based on the QLA. Another example of that is the final question of the paper, question 50, asks pupils to tick a box to show whether the word once is used as an adverb or a conjunction. So adverbs are introduced in year 2, and then conjunctions, although pupils in year 2 use them in their writing, the terminology conjunction is year 3 subject knowledge. But that was deemed to be the hardest question on the paper because it was number 50, and actually the QLA fully supports that. We've got 26.9% of children getting the mark for that. Lots of schools may say the implication of that is it's question 50 of a very challenging paper. Perhaps fatigue has kicked in as well. But what we can't get away from is that in those final 10 questions of the paper, all year groups are represented in terms of content. So that's a huge implication for schools to consider. How are we making sure that our pupils are first practicing a skill when they're introduced to it in year 1 and 2, and then being challenged to be able to really reason with that skill? So something, for example, like an adverb, first introduced to it in year 2, probably next to the verb being able to say to children, he ran down the street quickly, or mum chopped the strawberries carefully. But actually adverbs can be at the front of a sentence, or adverbs don't have to be next to the verb. And then we've got the whole new difficulty with question 40 where the adverb didn't end in ly. Teachers can prepare their pupils to be able to access the Key Stage 2 grammar test and be really confident that test technique is not going to hold their pupils back or penalise them. We obviously want pupils to understand grammar in a context. We want pupils to understand that grammar is exciting and is actually a really powerful tool of language that they can use in their writing and make their writing better. Children will be able to craft their writing skills if they have a thorough and secure understanding of grammar. But we can't escape the fact that pupils are being tested on their grammar knowledge and understanding. And what we don't want to happen is that some pupils are not able to access the test due to a test technique issue. So one of the issues is the instructional language of the test. So circling, underlining, matching, tick 1. They're very basic test techniques, but sometimes some pupils lose the mark because they haven't fully understood how to do that. So when they have to circle an adverb, we don't want them circling the correct word and perhaps half of another word. So it's about teaching precision so that the children understand that there is no ambiguity for the person who's marking their question. The other issue that I would definitely flag up for teachers in terms of test technique is that although the Key Stage 2 paper 1 is the question paper, pupils do need to be able to spell the tenses and verbs correctly, prefixes and suffixes, and they will be penalised in some of the questions if their spelling is not accurate, even though this is not the spelling test. Equally, if pupils have to rewrite a sentence in the passive or the active, which this year they had to do, question 49, children had to rewrite in the passive, 32.2% of pupils got that question correct. And we know that some of those pupils understood the grammatical area of the question, but perhaps when they rewrote it, they didn't put the full stop. It seems harsh. It's an element of the test technique that as teachers, it seems almost cruel that pupils get the correct grammar right and then they've missed the mark because they forgot the full stop. Or if pupils use a proper noun in their response, in their written response, and they don't capitalise it, even though the grammar might be correct, what they've actually done is negated their mark, because in the question it will say, remember to punctuate your answer correctly. And that is basically the cover of you need to get everything correct. So in previous years, pupils might have been asked to write a question. And what we would hope as teachers is that they would write something simple like, how old are you? Or what is your name? But sometimes pupils, because they are crafting their writing trade, they write creative responses. So they might write something like, what time is the football match between X and Y being shown on BBC or ITV on Saturday the 18th of March? And within there, they've got to capitalise those football teams' names and the BBC or ITV, and also the Saturday and March. So if they miss one capital or they put an extra comma, because they have tried to do a more complex question, not showing off, but actually just showing what they can do, they're going to lose that mark when they could have just written, what is your favourite colour?